Good morning, Pumpkin! Are you still in bed? I'm coming in! Rise and shine, sleepyhead. It's gorgeous out. You don't want to waste the day in bed, do you?
It's so early, Mom. Come back later.
Honestly, you can't spend your vacation lying in bed. And did you sleep in your brand new suit?
I had a late night. It's tough being vice president of the world.
You've been in office one day.
Let's all admit something right now. Earthbound is a classic Super Nintendo game. And yes, it was really Mother 2, the original being released on the Famicom, but we knew that one game as Earthbound, that SNES lost classic. It actually bombed when it was originally released, most likely because it was super expensive with that giant box and player's guide packed in. The point I'm trying to make here is that it is now considered a classic game, even though it wasn't when it was originally released. And developers have been trying to mimic that style that Earthbound offered with varying degrees of success. So here we have another contender, Citizens of Earth. And this actually started off as a Kickstarter game that I actually previewed way back when. And unfortunately, it failed to find enough fans out there to fund the game. But Atlas entered, thought the game was cool, and published it. So here we are, Citizens of Earth has arrived. And I just want to say, this is actually a really fun, goofy game. It's got a couple of problems that keep it from being an instant classic or even a really great game, but that doesn't mean it isn't one to check out. For starters, the story is completely ridiculous. You take on the role of the Vice President of the world, and there's just madness that ensues. But much like Earthbound, it takes place in a modern setting, and I like to think of this as almost like a spoof of Earthbound because it follows a lot of the tropes that Earthbound had in terms of storyline and setting, but it just goes absolutely wacky with them. There are countless characters in this game, from the crazy, paranoid conspiracy guy to a German chef. Yeah, that's right. It's wacky. It's insane. And therein lies the game's biggest charms. Most of the game is a little bit too vague for its own good. What I'm talking about here are game objectives. Like in any role-playing game, you need to go to, town X or this building or that building. And most of the time, the log simply tells you just that. Like, for example, really early on in the game, you'll be charged with finding the evidence. But what exactly does that mean? Where exactly do I have to go? Now, part of me really enjoys that because you don't know. It's that mystery, that allure, that sort of nostalgia-inspired feeling that you get from playing these old games because that's how it was back in the day. They weren't all fleshed out games telling you, pointing arrows, oh here, go there. But the thing is with this one is I find it's a little too convoluted for its own good, and you will have trouble figuring out where to go next. I also thought the battle system, while enjoyable, is just, I don't know, too simplistic or maybe not fleshed out enough. I just found it getting very, very repetitive around the 10-hour mark because I found every battle played out pretty much exactly the same. So here's essentially how it works. It's based on an energy system. So one light attack typically will generate an energy sphere, whereas a hard attack or a strong attack will deplete an energy sphere. So you're always sort of trying to build up your energy spheres in order to use magical attacks or powerful attacks, which then drain or deplete your energy. And then, again, you cycle back and try and do light attacks to build up energy again. I just found it a little bit too simplistic and a little bit just way too repetitive as you progress. And I also thought the game's pacing was a little bit off because of this. So for example, let's say I'm going around and I'm beating up bad guys, everything is cool, everything's going great, and then I'll enter a new area and it's almost like Dragon Quest where wabam, you're right back to being, well, basically a baby all over again, and enemies will utterly crush you. Now, one thing that is really cool, taken from Earthbound, is that if you revisit areas with weaker enemies, much weaker enemies than you can simply click on them, and what'll happen is the vice president will say, like, charge, and your compatriots will race out and tackle the enemy, and you can get like an instant win. Now, going back to these characters for just a second here, one thing I also should mention is the fact that there are tons of them. Literally tons and tons and tons of characters. But what's annoying is that at no point do they just join you. You always have to do a little side quest or something like that. And I find that's sort of artificially extending the length of the game. And that was a little bit disappointing. Overall, Citizens of Earth is a fun game. It's decent, I guess, or I could say it's good. It's just not great, it's not epic, it's not a masterpiece. I think a little more time in the oven just to, I don't know, maybe fix some of the pacing, some of the balance issues, and make the battle system just a tad more interesting, because man, the dialogue and just the game's world is awesome. Really, really awesome. So, unfortunately though, I think this one is it just needed a little more time in the oven to let some of the ideas flesh out. If you want way more information on Citizens of Earth, be sure to head on over to projectcoe.com.
Ooh! Ouch! You're working for them! Ooh! Ouch!
I could do it!
They'll never expect this! Yay! Ha! Well done, team.